Well, good day, everybody. Welcome to the Lifetime Trainer Talks podcast. And today is going to be a fun episode where we're going to teach you some new tools, some new education, and just some things that might just be jaw dropping, man. And we've got Alex Kanellis, who is the founder of Landmine U. He's a strength coach, master's degree, CSCS, who's worked with high school level athletes for 10 years, interned at the University of Iowa, and then found a guy named David Weck, who's created the Weck method, who we've had on the show before. Brilliant guy, and worked under him for years to really kind of come up with proper education on how to use this amazing tool called the Landmine, which is an absolute blast. So, I love it. I've been going through the education. I found you on Instagram, and the good thing is there's so many not so good people on Instagram. And that was the sole reason why, we created this podcast. But man, I love it because I found people like yourself and many others. So there are some great ones. So Alex, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. Love the opportunity. Excited to share it.
Perfect. And a fellow guy from Iowa. So I went to college in Iowa. So it's spent plenty of times up at the University of Iowa at a certain bar called the Union, but we won't go into that right now.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just start, man, with your journey, because it is what I'm going to say odd. It's odd from the standpoint as you come from a CSCS, traditional strength training background, and then you found David Weck, who's the inventor of the BOSU. Well, tell us about your journey and then how you kind of came to found that.
Sure. So I was lucky enough to play football at the University of Iowa. As soon as I got done playing, I knew I wanted to be in the weight room. So I interned there. I, like you said, have a traditional sort of education base where I knew I had to get my CSCS. I wanted to get my master's degree in exercise science, kinesiology. I did all that. Originally, for me, I was just obsessed with getting strong. So for me, my real journey starts, in the mid 90s with VHS tapes of Louis Simmons, and I got deep into West Side Barbell and the conjugate system. And for my first half of my career at the high school level, that's what we were doing. We were doing a lot of powerlifting. I still love powerlifting. I still use it with my athletes. But at some point, I was exposed to the Spinal Engine theory, the textbook by Serge Grakovetsky. It got me kind of thinking about how maybe our spine is meant to move a little bit differently or more robustly than what we were doing with the squat, bench, deadlift. And, I tried to find education that fit in that, box for me. I wanted to learn more. And that's kind of how I got exposed to David Weck. So he was at the time doing a ton of interesting stuff with coiling the core and using the lats to power locomotion. And I said, man, I have to learn more about this. This, to me, feels different than anything I've been exposed to. I think it fits, and I just had to learn more. So I was lucky enough to get to work with David for a couple of years.
It's so, I say this again, trainer audience out there, the ability to find information, understand the information, and then find a mentor or find somebody is, I've had many across my career. Obviously you're talking about, people that have influenced you, and it's so important. So, huge tip to that, and special shout out to you as well. But let's go back, because you mentioned a book that I had heard of. I have not read, called The Spinal Engine by Serge Grakovetsky. And what I remember is actually going through some Paul Chek stuff, and he talked about it quite a bit. And he said that there was, in this book, there's a guy that has no legs that actually moved pretty well, like walked and ran pretty well with no legs, no, artificial implants or anything like that as well. So, talk about what you learned and give the audience a little bit of, what about the Spinal Engine.
Sure. So, and that's a really powerful image to kind of be like, hey, this. So locomotion doesn't happen with your hips and shoulders totally square. Otherwise, this guy wouldn't be able to move. And he's lifting his hips and he's dropping his shoulders. He's moving across the room pretty impressively too. So the basis of that textbook is that your spine is the primary engine for forward locomotion. So we talk a lot about locomotion and how that is the primary function of the body. When you start talking about functional training and throwing that word out there, to me, it's important that you're relating it to locomotion. So if that's the primary function of our body, then your training should reflect that. If you're doing functional training, similar to like, you know, with the car, you could add spinners, upgrade the stereo. Those are great adjustments. They're not functional unless they help the car drive forward. So Greg Vetsky just starts looking at salamanders, animals, babies crawling and saying, gosh, you know, really, this is driven through what we're doing in your torso with your ribs and hips and in the spinal sort of level. So what's different there compared to what you learn when you go through all this traditional education is that they want you to brace your core, keep everything neutral, and that the legs are the primary engine for locomotion. And that it's just, I think the spinal engine theory, these concepts of how your core and your lats, your obliques can create locomotive patterns. I think in the future, it'll be a little bit more standard in terms of our education for this profession, but it's just not right now.
Yeah. And that's the way it is. And people don't, you know, understand it. And again, I'm imagining, again, I haven't read the book, but it's a pretty deep book. Like, so you got to have some knowledge to be able to decipher it as well.
I try and work through these textbooks. Like when, you know, when Louis said to get super training.
Oh God.
I mean, man, it's a lot, right? But the basic basis of the spinal engine is your shoulder goes down and back, your hip comes up and forward, and that can be the catalyst for forward movement.
Got it.
Try to make it simple in terms of like the system and the real application.
Got it. So, you know, one more question with regards to, again, obviously David Weck's known to create the BOSU. So everybody associates him with, you know, unstable surface training and, you know, and it's almost the antithesis of what is taught in CSCS or the traditional person, most of them, not all, that go down that route. So when you kind of got talking with him and learning from him and actually moved out to San Diego to learn from him, you know, what was the surprise of, hey, you mean everything isn't done on a BOSU, or like this guy's got something else? So would you mind, you know, just talking to people out there? Because I think so many people might not look at Weck Method or anything that he does. And I don't want this to be totally about Weck Method, but I think it's important to discuss.
Yeah, same. And really, I didn't go out there because of the BOSU ball. I think what David's story is fascinating, that, you know, he invented the BOSU ball and ended up with, you know, mailbox money, but he continued his kind of journey into movement. And he's really just fascinated with human movement. What got me out there was these videos he was posting about coiling your core. And I just tried to match a couple of positions. My lat started cramping. I started feeling it when I was moving. And I said, man, I'd really like to learn more about this guy. And really, when he does talk about the BOSU ball, he says it's not about an unstable surface. It's about compression. It's about those angles that we're putting your foot at. And but yeah, no, and David he's a fascinating guy. I think a lot of really brilliant people are, but he is out there. So like you said, you know,
it's all of them, right? And it's like the further you go down the rabbit hole. Sure. And that's why I've always said it, you know, I've said this for a long time, though, when I get in front of people, is the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Right.
And be okay with it. And the further you go down that rabbit hole, you know, the more odd to the general population things become. I think that's the world we're in right now. Right?
David is a consummate learner. So when he finds a fascinating idea, and me or Chris, who's out there with him now, would kind of try to, I don't know how to say, translate it or put it into a system that can be easily presented. He's already on to the next idea.
Yeah. And Chris is trying to figure out how to do the next.
Still trying to learn and
perfect. Well, let's bring it back, man, but it is fascinating. I think it's important for people to know as well. Again, and the last thing I want to leave everybody with is, whether it's the Landmine that we're going to talk about or the BOSU or whatever, it's just because you see people using it a certain way doesn't mean that that's actually the way that it was intended to be used. And I think what you guys as trainers out there or health enthusiasts are going to learn today a bit is the proper way to use a landmine and how to, you know, get these amazing impacts of the spinal engine and the coiling and things that we'll talk about. So would you first explain, some people might not even know, and we're already in it. Hopefully they saw your shirt, but you know, what is the landmine and how did you come to find it?
So a landmine is an old tool, and it's basically just a corner bar.
Yeah.
And I've seen videos, way old black and white videos of old Russian wrestlers just putting the bar into a sweatshirt in the corner of the room. So just having a pivot point
And
with
putting a hole in the corner of the of the drywall.
ruining the drywall. Yeah, right. No, but so yeah, it's a real simple tool. It's something that a lot of gyms have. Like we had them sitting around. Nowadays, they come kind of attached to a lot of the racks in the bigger rooms. And I'm hesitant not to sit to. I don't like to say there's an improper way to use them, but traditionally, what you see a lot of people do is the core work. Either they're rotating with the bar or they're kind of resisting rotation and moving the bar around. T-bar rows, all that stuff is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, it ended up being sort of a perfect tool to combine my worlds, because I had this information about the spinal engine and the way we wanted to move through the core. I had my weightlifting background, which I love, and I'm not willing to give up. And I wanted to connect the dots and create something that we could use to educate better movement and to make better movers, but also throw some weight on, set some PRs, and build explosive strength. And landmine ended up being a great tool for that. Really, for me, it served as an alternative to the Olympic lifts. So that similar speed, that snap that you get with the Olympic lifts, with the landmine, we're able to do it with forward intent. So a little bit more aggressive angles. We're never on our heels. We're always on the balls of our feet. And it allows all this joint movement, this rotation that you can do with your body. Positions are just a little bit more accessible for a lot of people than the traditional Olympic positions.
Yep. So then, when did you decide I'm going to actually create some education and put this thing together into what Landmine U is now?
Yeah, it's interesting. So like, it was sort of the tool that it sucked me right in from the beginning. Before I ever went to San Diego, and I was a high school strength coach who had a ton of success, 6 state football championships in a row.
Attaboy.
8 in a row. Soccer, basketball, we were killing it. It was all really fun.
What high school was it?
Iowa City, Regina. It's a
Okay.
Catholic school in town.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
And I'm not taking credit for any of that.
No. But
I coached the opposite line. So,
attaboy.
So that's the one place where I would take a little bit of credit.
Yeah.
But I was back then even experimenting with the landmine because I didn't like the amount of time it took to teach the Olympic lifts. I felt like we could kind of use the landmine to create a couple of replacements that we could get down a lot faster and get the kids moving explosively. Then, when COVID hit and we weren't doing the in-person education at WEC Method, and I wasn't doing in-person training at all, gave me some time to reflect and think about, what it was that I was really passionate about, what I wanted to share or what I wanted to put out there. And really this landmine system was something that I had been kind of using in my own training and when I was training athletes, but I never really sat down and tried to package it or organize it. And, COVID, that's when I decided I'm going to do this. I'm going to invest some time. I'm going to get better at being in front of the camera and filming myself. And I'm going to try to see how many people I can help with this system, because it is super easy to progress. And I think like the way I designed it was designed for the coach. So it was designed to be able to be taught, and a real clear order of how you teach it.
Yeah. And kudos. And, we talked about this off the air, I'm about maybe a quarter, halfway through it now. And I got to tell you, I've been developing education for trainers for a long time and seen and gone through an enormous amount of education, especially virtual. And how you succinctly created the programs is brilliant. I mean, it's quick. And when I say quick, it doesn't mean it's not detailed. It's detailed, but you're giving the talking points importance in a 1 to 2 minute video, and then boom, let's go practice. Let's do this. And this back and forth journey, which really, if people follow it, you're gonna understand it and get good at it. You'll probably cramp a little bit in the beginning, though. I will tell you that. So great stuff, man. And so, so how long? When did you launch it?
It's been like a year, so it's just been a little bit over. And the virtual certification that you're taking right now is newer than that. So we just came out with that in December.
Got it.
But Prior to that, and there's alternate ways to learn about it. I've got a website with some courses and tutorials and stuff. And then we were doing the in-person certifications, which ended up has been great. It's gone pretty well.
And you're going out to On It, right?
This weekend. We're going On It. Yeah, this weekend.
Yeah. So when this releases, it might be a week back, but congratulations on that one.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, so I would like to dive into a couple, there's some specific things that you talk about. You mentioned forward intent, and these are kind of the principles, right? Would you mind explaining what forward intent is, and then obviously why it works so well with the landmine and the importance of that carrying over into sport? And we'll go through a couple other ones so we can give some cool, tips for all the trainers out there.
No, totally. So forward intent is really special because it's one of the things that you can do with the landmine that it's really hard to create with anything else. It's easy to do with a wall as well. So if you post yourself on the wall into a position where you're trying to push forward, now you have forward intent. You're trying to drive, but the wall's not going to move. So with the landmine, what we're able to do is, like, in all of our positions, be it a squat, be it a lunge, throughout the entire movement, we take the slack out by trying to push the landmine, by driving through the landmine.
And you can see it if you sit up. You can see it on the shirt of just the guy on the shirt, just where he's at.
Sure. Yep, if I'm pushing on this wall, first of all, if I'm just doing a squat, a lot of times we have more vertical angles with our shin, with our knee. When it's time for me to sprint, my knee goes out over my toe, my spine angle gets aggressive. And when I post against the wall, I can do a squat where I'm driving forward through the wall, and now my angles are more aggressive. We use the landmine the same way. And, the goal is to create more carryover when it's time to move. It's trying to move through somebody or just move through space. So that is forward intent, and it's something that, it also, it's fascinating. It takes the slack out of your body. When you have that sort of directional drive, it makes you just a little bit more stable, and it allows you to move really explosively too.
Awesome. And so, I know you have the pound squat that you use as kind of a way to explain that. Would you just take and show somebody what is that? I know you don't have the landmine, but what is that particular movement?
A pound squat is essentially a goblet squat with the landmine. And the biggest difference is that on a regular squat, your coach will tell you to sit back on your heels. And when you do that, your shins are going to be straight up and down. You can do that with the landmine. It's hard for you to see right now, but my heels are totally flat. The biggest difference with the pound squat is that as I sink into the squat, I want to keep as much forward drive through the bar as possible. So if you could imagine like a pressure measurement that measured how hard that bar was jamming into the landmine, we would want to keep that consistent the whole time. When we do that, our heels are going to naturally be up off the ground, and we finish with our heels up off the ground as well. So it's a squat through the balls of your feet. And the biggest difference between a pound squat and a regular squat is that even as we drop into the eccentric, we're driving forward, trying to maintain a parallel spine shin angle.
Got it. So as a strength coach, you've said you still love the power lifts, you still love the Olympic lifts. I think some people might be getting the idea of, I'm going to take something. It's not taking away, it's adding in. But more specifically, the reasoning why your toes are staying up and your heels are staying up in this squat, and why would they do that? And again, why is landmine perfect for that?
Because that's how you're going to play your sport most of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
well, and anybody who's ever done any sprint training knows that it's that forward locomotion. So obviously some great carryover there. Cool. Well, one of the other things too, and then, I want to kind of dive into a bit more of the science too, is holding the bar. You have a specific way, and I think a lot of people might not hold the bar properly. Would you mind just kind of quickly explaining why you have the kind of the double C and what that is?
Yeah, that's really simple. We just tell people to stack 2 C's and just use that strong ridge on each hand to support the bar. And a lot of our stuff, as it comes from rotating the bar, and we get into a lot of unilateral positions. And it's just a great way to set you up to make sure that you're able to grip on this side, boom, we're able to switch grip on that side, and we're not doing any damage to the fingers. Sometimes people will try to interlock their fingers.
Yep.
really we need a base underneath the bar.
Yeah.
Some
And
people tap it with their thumbs and they can get bruises and
Mhm.
lose it, but
Yeah.
we always just stack 2 C's. Yeah.
And again, the importance of that as it relates to the things that you teach with regard to spinal engine. So some, some people might not be doing it if they're doing other movements, but that's very specific to your education and what you're trying to accomplish, correct?
Yeah, totally. I mean, just it's going to help you get into those positions and get in and out of them fast.
Got it. Two other things I'd love to talk about is, you have the Landmine U landmarks. And would you mind explaining that? Because obviously this is a bit of the application of the spinal
Sure.
engine,
Yeah.
which is really the basis of a lot of what you're teaching and how it's different than what you may see elsewhere with regard to this.
Yeah, and the landmarks were kind of my big moment for me when I felt this, discovered this. It made me think, oh gosh, you know what? All that stuff that we've been making really wordy and talking about coiling core and all that stuff that we've been doing, I can teach it really fast and I can make it really simple. And all this stuff that we're trying to feel, and some people just don't feel it, I can guarantee that people will feel it fast. And then we can use it and apply it to specific exercises. So the landmark is essentially just the contact point between your elbow and your hip on the short side of your body. So when we're getting into these coiled positions, we're trying to get one of our shoulders down and back and that same hip up and forward. If we can wedge the elbow low on the hip and kind of memorize that spot, then we can create pressure through that spot. We try to do that from both directions. So not only is my elbow driving into my hip, but my hip is driving up into my elbow. And that's really key. Just doing that will help you lift your heel off the ground, start using your oblique for locomotion. And it makes it really easy for us to establish a short side, which is always our front foot side. And then the other side we call the long side. And you start feeling the stretch through those same muscles there. But being able to join that landmark from both directions and then get in and out of it quick, it makes it really easy to coach and teach the coiled movements, the rotational explosive movements with the landmine. It's just meant to make everything simpler.
Beautiful. And those, if you're just listening on whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify, go to the YouTube channel and you can see exactly what Alex is talking about because we have the, obviously the video version. So the last one I'd like to talk about is just, you've talked about it quite a bit, is coiled training, coiled movement, and what that is. I know you've been showing it, you've been saying it, but I just want to put those two things together for somebody and what the importance of that as well.
Sure. Yeah. And this is a lot of, David's stuff. David Weck really gets deep into coiled core and coiling your core. And it was the thing that initially drew me to him because it's essentially the antithesis of what we do in the weight room. Everything is constantly, resist rotation and keep your shoulders and hips square, always keep your spine neutral. And then we go out to play a game and it's time to hit a bat and you see these super coiled positions, the shoulders dip, the hips and shoulders are a way steep angle. And, then you start watching people bowling and you realize, oh, wow, they're doing the same thing. There is no square spine anywhere in any of these sports. So how much are we really helping them by telling them to constantly keep their hips and shoulders square? So a lot of our unilateral movements, they come from that. So if you're going to do a lunge with your right leg, we often will do it coiled and we'll try to keep the right lat and oblique as contracted as possible. Your shoulders will not be square. You'll be rotated and side bending towards that front foot. And you start just to engage a lot of the muscles in your core, your lats, your obliques will start to generate power through those movements. And I swear by it. I think it can just have more athletic carryover, especially for rotational sports and especially for someone who has a deficiency on one side. So you'll feel you can get really coiled on one side. And then when I tell you to swing the bat with your left, something feels different, and that something is coming from your lat and your oblique on that side.
Got it. Well, and it almost sounds like this tool is almost the perfect tool. I know David's got some other stuff, to work on that, but it's almost a perfect tool to be able to do this properly or safely as well.
For me, it is. And for me, it was always about, I lose interest if I can't teach it to a room full of 14-year-olds.
Love it.
That's kind of my background, and that's just the way that I like things to be communicated. So with this tool, I really do think that it's the best because it can be the simplest. And I can take 60 high school kids through a 1 hour workshop, and by the end, they all understand what coiled training is. They can all do a split clean, split jerk. They can do our movements in that hour, and they're going to start feeling a lot different when they move around. They're going to feel that carryover. And I just don't know another tool that can get us there that fast.
Got it. And, again, just want it to be said, we're not talking about putting 300-400 pounds in a back squat and being coiled.
Right. Yes. Right.
Because sometimes, people take what you say and just totally, again, like with the Bosu or anything else, they take it. That's not what we're talking about.
For me, the coiled stuff mainly we do is unilateral, and it's assistance work. And like I said, there's still a place for absolute strength, and I still squat, I still deadlift, I still bench press. I love that stuff, and you're never going to find that grinding rep. So what we're doing is very explosive. It's a little bit faster in nature. We do load it, and we do load heavy, clean, and jerks, and catches. But it's always going to be explosive, and you're always going to be in an athletic position.
And it's in a position and a load that is safe because it's safer. I mean, everything's got a risk, right? Everything's got a risk, but that's awesome. And so, you've talked a lot about the athletes, and I want to dive into that a bit more, but, have you used it with the everyday person, and what have you found with that type of person when trying to teach this and utilizing the tool?
I've had a lot of success with everyday people too. And there's a lot of good trainers that I've worked with as well that are kind of exponentially spreading the word about the system and doing a lot of training with Gen Pop. For me, the biggest thing is kind of the speed of the movement. So when you get your entire body moving this fast and you teach someone a couple of these movements, you do those split switches, and it's like, wow, I feel like an athlete again. The amount of and these, Gen Pop guys with their fitness watches, and they're talking about how many calories they burn, and it's great for that. Yeah. It will take a lot out of you. It's exhausting, and it feels like sprinting without sprinting, I tell people, which is great. But the biggest thing is that I think that speed of movement, so the explosive strength training. So if we take the average Gen Pop guy, he'll come in, he'll do some mobility, maybe he'll do some strength training, maybe he'll do some stuff for hypertrophy, some higher rep stuff, and then maybe he'll do some cardio. And that system, that pie chart, it's not unlike an athlete, except that maybe they're not practicing sports skills or maybe they're not sprinting. But the one thing that they are missing is explosive strength training. And every college athlete's doing Olympic lifts and they're doing explosive strength training. But when you get a Gen Pop person in off the street, you don't have time to teach them how to do a traditional hang clean, a snatch. So you just don't do explosive weight training. Well, when we have this system, and it's really easy to start introducing and incorporating, you fill that box and people just start feeling better, and they feel more like an athlete because they're doing something that is inherently more athletic than what they were doing before.
Well, and I love the training that you start with basic movements and a lot of isometrics. And I've got a background. I went through muscle activation technique specialist and, many years ago. So a lot of isometrics are used in that to help get the connection back. So I can't imagine too, a lot of people, by doing some of this kind of activation, or you'll cramp in a lot of times because the signals aren't there and other muscles are trying to help out and just do what you're asking it to do. There's probably a decent amount of not only flow, but just almost a corrective element from doing those isometrics and getting more muscles to fire the way that they're supposed to.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest feedbacks I get. And I try to keep it, make it what it is. So I'm just using this system to teach you these movements, but I do get a lot of feedback with people saying, man, my back feels great, and I feel I'm moving differently. I've never thought this hard about how I was moving, and it's really unlocked some other things, which is, super gratifying and exciting to me to see that. But, and like you said, the ISOs, it's we say positions before transitions. That's another one of my sort of principles. But like we talked about, with the landmine, you can hold your lunge and then apply forward intent, get some positive drive, apply rotational intent, try to spin that bar even harder. And any isometric training you're doing, we can intensify and just make it a little bit more applicable to when it's time for you to move. And it's powerful.
Well, I'd like to kind of end with a couple of things of just, you mentioned some things that, are vitally important to use the tool properly. And again, I think coming from the standpoint of, and I loved how you said it too, because some people say this is bad, this is good. Well, who knows? We don't know what the whys, but you've got a specific system that you're teaching. And what is some of the things that you're seeing out there that, you would say are higher risk, maybe not bad, but higher risk when doing and using them?
And so another reason the landmine's a great tool is that it's relatively low risk. I think, it's pretty rare to see a landmine injury. I haven't seen one doing my stuff, and you can't find them online. It's not something that you see people,
You don't see somebody underneath the landmine.
Rarely, right? Yeah. I think what we're doing, or what I'm doing, is kind of taking it to extremes as well. So a lot of people do some explosive stuff with the landmine, but they don't push it in terms of, how much force can you actually produce. We can load decent amounts of weight on here, and if we can move that bar fast the direction that we want, then we can get a ton out of this tool. I think a lot of people just don't use it explosively enough. It's such a great tool because you have that built-in stability, you have those forward angles, and you can go, man. You can be really explosive with some of these movements, and you're going to see people. The other great thing about it, people with overhead restrictions having a hard time getting their hands over their head. When we give on one side and we create a little bit of external rotation, then this overhead movement, and it's in front, so it's not as extreme of an angle, but it allows people to train that way and feel like they're throwing something over their head, which is a really powerful feeling for anyone that's, ever gotten deep into the Olympic lifts. We're trying to make that accessible to everybody.
Yeah, that's great. And if it's able, you can get them, again, there's so much technique. I mean, there's technique in everything, but there's a heck of a lot more technique and what I would say is mobility that you may need when you start getting into the Olympic lifts.
Yeah, and it's little things too. It can be a wrist issue. Like what happened with me, I had a couple injuries on this arm, and it wasn't so much that I couldn't do cleans, but they started becoming a little bit less comfortable.
Yep.
And, I think even a lot of Olympic weightlifting coaches, they give up the Olympic lifts at some point in their career. They still coach them with their athletes, but then they're in their powerlifting, which is fine. You do both. And, but it's definitely accessible for any number of people.
Awesome. Well, we've talked about a lot, and I highly recommend, you going through the course. There will be I believe a 25% off. Anybody who's listening, you can get that code. It'll be in the show notes for you to grab and use. So we appreciate that. And, anything else you want to leave, the group and the people that are listening with, from your perspective?
No, just, my message to people is just to try to keep learning, and especially in this industry, I think there's a lot of things that are recycled for good reason. There's a lot of information that you get beat over the head with, which is a lot of it is great, but sometimes we just have to take a step back and ask ourselves if the methods that we're using right now, the way that we're training people or training athletes, if you think it's going to be the same 100 years from now. And if you don't, then, start looking into what direction you think it's going and learn and try to learn from the best people and stay curious, know?
Well, and one more thing I think I want to add is, my passion has always been to change this industry and to make it a true profession where people can retire, as a trainer, as a coach, whatever, we fit pro, I get hit sometimes calling it fitness professional, because they're like, well, we're coaches. I'm like, well, I'm just trying to elevate it to the people, the world, so that we're not just, this bodybuilder that we used to be,
Oh, yeah.
30 years ago. And the thing that I love too, Alex, and really appreciate about you is you not only searched out the education, but then you found the passion, and found a way to make a living with that passion. And I think that's so, and it's specialized, I mean, you do other things, but this little one niche that you're now taking and just exploding is fantastic. And just, it's use it out there. And I think a lot of people also go and learn from all these people, and then they're afraid to create something that is, in conjunction with, but, is your own thing. So again, huge kudos to you, man.
I appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's a grind, but it's something that
Yep.
I'm passionate about. So I'm just going to keep swinging and try to make it happen.
Sweet. So again, we'll have, all of your Instagram handles and website and all that. It's landmineuniversity.com. At Landmine University is the Instagram handle. That's where I found them. Great stuff, great videos, showing everything that we talked about today. But again, go to the website. We're going to be doing some, you're doing some live courses, and hopefully we'll be able to get some of those in our clubs at some point. And really just appreciate you and your knowledge and your ability to pass that on.
Thank you, man. I appreciate the opportunity. Always good talking.